morning sun filtered through the high windows of the county courthouse, casting long shadows across the wooden benches as people slowly filled the room. Everyone seemed tense because the case they were about to witness was no ordinary case. Rumors had spread all over town that the young billionaire defendant, Tyler Grange, would appear in court today, and people wanted to see how the famous Judge Marcellus Reed would handle him. Judge Reed entered quietly, walking with calm confidence. His presence alone brought order to the room. He was a respected black judge, known for fairness, wisdom, and patience even with the most difficult people. As he took his seat, the bailiff stepped forward and shouted the familiar words. "All rise." Everyone in the courtroom stood respectfully, except one person, Tyler Grange. Tyler sat with his legs crossed. Leaning back in the chair like he owned the entire building, he kept his sunglasses on, even indoors, tapping his fingers on the table as if bored by everything around him. Gasps floated across the courtroom when people realized he was refusing to rise. Some whispered in shock, others shook their heads. But Tyler didn't care. Judge Reed noticed the disrespect immediately. But he did not show anger. He only tilted his head slightly. Observing the young man with thoughtful eyes, Tyler didn't even look up at him. His lawyer whispered urgently, telling him to stand. But Tyler brushed him off with a smirk. "I don't stand for anyone," he muttered loudly enough for half the room to hear. The bailiff's jaw tightened. The family sitting behind the prosecution bench looked furious. A few people murmured that Tyler was insulting the judge because of his position. Others thought it was because of his race. Whatever the reason, the disrespect was clear. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavier with every second. Judge Reed calmly opened a file, his voice steady as he began the hearing. He did not comment on Tyler's behavior yet. Instead, he read out the charges in a measured tone. Tyler yawned, stretching his arms, completely uninterested. His careless attitude made people exchange looks of disbelief. It was as if he believed he was untouchable. The prosecution stood and began describing the night of the incident. Tyler had been speeding through a residential neighborhood in his luxury sports car, ignoring stop signs and traffic signals. There were witnesses, security cameras, and police reports. The evidence against him looked strong, but Tyler's confident smile said he believed none of it mattered. A mother sitting in the front row wiped tears from her eyes as the prosecutor described how her child had almost been hit by Tyler's car. The little boy had frozen in fear, and Tyler had driven past without slowing down. The mother trembled, remembering the moment. People around her felt sympathy, but Tyler sat stone-faced, almost amused that his actions were being discussed publicly. Judge Reed listened carefully, his expression unreadable. He asked a few short questions, making sure every detail was clear. When he spoke, the whole court listened. His voice carried strength, not anger. Tyler kept staring at his phone under the table, pretending not to care, but Judge Reed saw everything. The judge finally turned his attention directly toward Tyler. "Mr. Grange," he said calmly, "do you understand the seriousness of these charges?" Tyler looked up slowly. Annoyed that someone had interrupted him, he shrugged. "It's being blown out of proportion," he replied. No one got hurt. His tone was cold and dismissive. As if he were talking about a scratched car instead of a frightened child, the courtroom reacted immediately. Someone whispered, "Unbelievable." Another person shook their head in disgust. But Judge Reed did not raise his voice. He simply watched Tyler with deep, steady eyes. The silence that followed made Tyler shift uncomfortably for the first time. Judge Reed continued the hearing, but his calmness now carried a quiet intensity. He had seen arrogance in his courtroom before, but Tyler's behavior was different. It was bold, disrespectful, and dangerously careless. People waited for the judge to scold him, but he remained surprisingly composed. No anger, no emotion, only observation throughout the morning. Tyler continued to act like the courtroom was beneath him. He whispered jokes to his lawyer, rolled his eyes, and leaned back in his chair. His expensive suit, gold watch, and designer shoes screamed privilege. But none of those things impressed Judge Reed. In fact, they only highlighted the gap between who Tyler believed he was and who he really needed to become. By the time the hearing paused for a short break, tensions in the courtroom felt like a storm waiting to erupt. Tyler still sat confidently, believing he was winning with his arrogance. But Judge Reed had already made mental notes of everything's the disrespect. The attitude, the refusal to stand, the lack of remorse. Everyone in the courtroom could sense it. Something powerful was coming. Judge Reed was calm. But his silence carried a message, the kind of message that always arrives before a judgment that changes everything. And deep down, even Tyler felt a faint shiver that he tried hard to hide. Tyler Grange walked out of the courtroom during the break with the same confidence he had carried inside, but there was a hint of irritation on his face. His lawyer followed close behind, whispering warnings, reminding him that Judge Reed was not like the other judges who usually let Tyler walk free. Tyler waved him away, acting as if nothing could ever touch him. The world in his mind always bent to his will. Outside in the hallway, people stepped aside as he passed. Not out of respect, but out of disbelief, they whispered about his behavior. They wondered how someone could disrespect a judge so boldly. Tyler heard some of the whispers. But instead of feeling embarrassed, he smirked. Pride filled him. The kind of pride that came from growing up in a world where money solved everything. Tyler's childhood had shaped him into who he was now. His father, Victor Grange, was one of the richest real estate tycoons in the state. He built skyscrapers, owned entire neighborhoods, and funded political campaigns. In his mansion, everyone obeyed his orders. No questions asked. Tyler learned early that money meant power, and power meant he could do anything he wanted without consequences. From a young age, Tyler never learned the meaning of limits. When he was 8 years old, he crashed a small ATV into the family's fountain. His father laughed and bought him a bigger one when he was 13. He broke his school's window during an argument. The principal wanted him suspended, but the next day, the principal received a generous donation and the suspension disappeared. These moments taught Tyler that rules were flexible, and responsibility was something for other people. By the time he reached adulthood, Tyler was a storm of entitlement. His social media showed a life of parties, fast cars, and private jets. He recorded videos of himself laughing at people he called ordinary. He had millions of views, and his followers worshipped him. They loved his expensive lifestyle and wild behavior. This attention only fed his already exaggerated ego. But the world did not see the whole truth behind the cameras and flashy clothes. Tyler lived with a constant fear of being ordinary, fear of being ignored, fear that without his father's money, he was nothing. He masked those feelings with arrogance, because arrogance was easier than admitting insecurity. No one knew this, not even his friends. His friendships were shallow, built on money, status, and temporary fun. When the party ended, he was alone every time back inside the courthouse. Judge Reed reviewed Tyler's file during the break. It was thick, full of warnings, dismissed charges, and previous complaints. The judge read slowly, understanding exactly what kind of person he was dealing with. He saw a pattern: a young man who had never been held accountable, a young man who believed the world owed him everything, and a young man who might become dangerous if no one stepped in to guide him toward responsibility. While everyone else talked about Tyler's disrespect, Judge Reed remained focused. He believed that real justice was not about punishment alone, but about transformation. He wondered if Tyler had ever faced a moment in his life where he was forced to look at himself honestly. Oh, maybe this case calmed. Tyler leaned against a marble pillar, checking his phone. He scrolled through messages from friends who joked about the dramatic courtroom show. They told him to teach the judge a lesson, and Tyler laughed at their foolishness. But deep down, something about Judge Reed bothered him. The calm in the judge's eyes, the silence, the steady voice. It was different from the anger he expected. Tyler was used to people shouting at him, getting frustrated, giving up. But Judge Reed didn't look like a man who gave up. DB the moment. If handled right, Tyler might change. If handled wrong, he might become worse. As the break ended, Tyler returned to the courtroom with a swagger in his step. People stared at him, expecting him to behave better after the first part of the hearing, but Tyler didn't change a thing. He tossed his sunglasses onto the table, stretched, and sat down with exaggerated comfort. His attitude screamed disrespect. His lawyer tried again to warn him, but Tyler only rolled his eyes. Across the room, Judge Reed entered silently. The courtroom fell still, Tyler's eyes briefly met the judge's, and for a moment, something flickered in his expression. A small spark of discomfort, but he quickly covered it with arrogance again, slouching in his chair. The bailiff shouted, "All rise," and once again, Tyler refused to stand. This time, the silence in the room was sharper, heavier. People watched Judge Red closely, waiting to see how he would respond. The judge's face remained calm, but something in his eyes changed. A quiet shift that promised Tyler's world was about to turn upside down. And Tyler, despite all his confidence, felt a strange chill he couldn't explain. A tiny voice inside him whispered that he had gone too far, but he pushed the feeling away, unaware that Judge Reed was preparing a path for him that would rewrite everything he believed about himself. Judge Marcellus Reed sat tall on the bench as the courtroom settled into silence. But inside his mind, memories stirred quietly. Memories of a life that looked nothing like Tyler Grange's world of privilege. He looked calm today, but that calm did not come easily. It was carved into him through years of struggle, sacrifice, and discipline. His silence was not weakness. His silence was power shaped by history. Marcellus Reed grew up in a neighborhood where sirens were louder than lullabies. His mother worked double shifts at a nursing home, and his father drove a taxi to keep food on the table. They had no luxury, no security, and no safety net, but they had determination. His parents taught him that dignity was not something money could buy. It had to be earned through character, effort, and respect in school. He was one of the brightest students, but he also faced challenges. He remembered teachers who doubted his potential, classmates who mocked him, and officers who questioned him simply for walking home late at night. He lived in a world that asked him to prove himself again and again, but he never let bitterness grow in his heart. Instead, he used every challenge as motivation to rise higher. When he earned a scholarship to study law, he carried his entire neighborhood's hope with him. He studied in libraries until midnight, worked part-time jobs to pay for books, and helped tutor other students. His path wasn't easy, but he walked it with determination. Every victory felt earned. Every accomplishment felt meaningful. Those years built the quiet strength that Tyler mistook for softness. After law school, Marcellus Reed became a public defender. He represented people who had no voice, people judged not by their actions, but by their circumstances. He listened to stories of struggle, poverty, and injustice. He saw young men who were never given a chance to grow. He saw fear, anger, and hopelessness every day. These experiences shaped him deeply. They taught him that real justice was not about punishing people, but about guiding them toward better choices. When he finally became the first black judge in the county, many doubted him. Some politicians tried to block his appointment, saying he was too young. Others whispered he was not the right fit, but he stayed calm, because he knew who he was and where he came from. His success was built on sweat, resilience, and unshakable faith. No insult could shake what life had taught him now. As he looked at Tyler Grange sitting with arrogance in his court, Judge Reed recognized something instantly. He knew this young man had never faced struggle, never built strength through hardship, never learned empathy through pain. Tyler was a product of comfort, shaped by praise, money, and entitlement, and that combination made him blind to consequences. Judge Reed took a breath and studied Tyler quietly. He knew anger wouldn't teach a man like him. Humiliation wouldn't help either. Tyler needed something different, something deeper. He needed to face himself in a way he never had before. He needed a sentence that would confront him with the real world, not the world built by his father's money. The courtroom watched Judge Reed with curiosity, wondering what he would do, but the judge was not rushed. He turned the pages of Tyler's file slowly. Absorbing every detail, Tyler watched him with irritation. Drumming his fingers on the table, the more calm the judge appeared. The more restless Tyler felt. It was strange to him. He was used to people reacting to him with anger or fear, not calm strength. Judge Reed finally lifted his eyes, and for a moment, their gazes locked. Tyler felt something unfamiliar: pressure. Not the pressure of anger, but the pressure of being truly seen. Judge Reed saw right through him, not to the wealth, not to the arrogance, but to the insecurity hiding beneath. Tyler shifted in his seat, trying to look unfazed, but his heartbeat quickened slightly. The judge asked a few direct questions, not harsh, but steady. "Mr. Grange, have you considered the consequences of your actions? You understand the danger you created? Do you believe the law does not apply to you?" Each question hit Tyler like a stone, because no one had ever asked him things like this. People usually avoided challenging him, but Judge Reed did not hesitate. Tyler answered with half-hearted shrugs and careless responses. But the judge observed more than the words. He saw the defensive tone, the mocking smile, the tension in Tyler's shoulders. He saw a young man who had built his entire personality on denial. Judge Reed knew this would not be easy. But he also knew that people changed not when frightened, but when confronted with truth. As the hearing resumed, everyone sensed Judge Reed was preparing a decision that would change the direction of the case. People leaned forward, waiting to hear his approach. But the judge was patient. He wanted every detail presented before he shaped the path for Tyler's transformation. His calmness was the calm before a storm that would not destroy Tyler, but rebuild him. And as Tyler sat in his expensive suit, believing he was untouchable, he had no idea that the man sitting above him, quiet and steady, was about to introduce him to a version of life he had never imagined. A version that would challenge his arrogance, confront his ego, and maybe, if fate was kind, reshape his heart. When the courtroom settled again after the break, the atmosphere felt heavier than before. A quiet tension hung in the air, the kind that made every whisper sound loud and every movement feel important. Judge Reed adjusted his glasses and signaled for the prosecution to continue. Tyler Grange leaned back in his chair and stretched with exaggerated boredom, as if the whole event was a performance made for his amusement. But the calm confidence on Tyler's face began to show cracks when the prosecutor announced that they had new evidence to present. A low murmur spread across the room. Everyone knew the case was already serious. But new evidence often meant the truth was about to hit harder than expected. Tyler turned his head slightly, still pretending not to care. But his lawyer shifted nervously beside him. The prosecutor wheeled a large screen to the front of the courtroom. He connected a small device and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this is the security footage taken from a house on Maple Street the night of the incident," he said. Tyler's eyebrows rose a little, but he kept a smirk on his lips. He whispered to his lawyer, "It's just me driving fast." Nothing new. His lawyer didn't reply, because he already sensed something worse was coming. The lights dimmed slightly as the video started playing. The courtroom fell into complete silence. The video showed a quiet neighborhood at night, street lamps glowing, houses lined neatly on both sides. Then, suddenly, headlights appeared at high speed. Tyler's luxury sports car shot across the screen like a bullet, swerving dangerously close to the sidewalk. Gasps filled the room, but the worst part came next. A small child on a bicycle tried crossing the street. Unaware of the speeding car, the child was no more than 8 years old. The video froze for a moment as the boy reached the middle of the road, then continued. Tyler's car missed him by inches. The child panicked, swerving and crashing onto the curb. The little boy lay there shaking as Tyler's car continued speeding without slowing even for a second. The mother in the courtroom cried out softly, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she watched the image of her terrified son replay on the screen. People looked at Tyler in disbelief. His arrogance now seemed cruel, hollow and dangerous. Even he looked slightly stunned, though he quickly tried to hide it with a shrug. Judge Reed's expression did not change, but the intensity in his eyes deepened. He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Grange, is this your vehicle?" Tyler swallowed and nodded reluctantly. "Yes," he said quietly. "But it's not as bad as it looks." The courtroom erupted with outrage, and the bailiff had to shout for order. Tyler rolled his eyes, annoyed that people were reacting so emotionally. The prosecutor paused the video at the moment the child fell. "Your Honor," he said, "the defendant did not stop, did not check on the child, and did not report the near collision to authorities." Tyler crossed his arms. Avoiding everyone's eyes, his lawyer whispered, "Don't say anything unless necessary," but Tyler ignored him. The kid should have looked where he was going. he muttered loudly. A wave of gasps swept across the courtroom again. People stared at him with disbelief. How could anyone show such little remorse, such little concern for a child's life? The mother bent forward, crying harder, her shoulders shaking. Tyler's cold words had pierced her like a blade. Reed slowly closed the file on his desk. His silence commanded respect. He let the emotions in the room settle before speaking. "Mr. Grange," he said, "a child nearly died because of your actions." Tyler shifted uncomfortably, trying to hide his unease behind arrogance. "It was an accident," he said. "I didn't hit him." The judge's eyes locked onto him, steady and penetrating. "Not hitting someone does not erase the danger you caused," he replied calmly. The prosecutor introduced a second clip, a video from a doorbell camera. It captured the boy crying on the curb seconds after Tyler raced by. Neighbors ran to help him, calling for his mother. The boy sobbed that a fast car almost killed him. His voice trembled with fear. That sound echoed through the courtroom like a haunting memory. Even the jurors, who had remained quiet up to this point, exchanged troubled glances. A few people shook their heads, while some whispered prayers. The room was no longer just a courtroom. It was a living reminder of how close tragedy had come to an innocent family. Tyler tried to lean back casually, but something had shifted in him. His arrogance now looked forced. His confidence looked shaky. The evidence had stripped away the jokes, the bravado, the ego. All that remained was a young man trying not to face the truth. Judge Reed took a long breath, then lifted his gaze. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "We will proceed," he said softly. "Because now the full picture is becoming clear," and as the video screen went dark, the room felt colder, heavier. Everyone understood that Tyler Grange's fate had changed in that moment. Whether he admitted it or not, the evidence had exposed him. Not just to the court, but to himself. The courtroom stayed silent for a long moment after the video ended. It was the kind of silence that came only after people witnessed something painful, something real, something that stayed in the mind. Tyler Grange sat stiffly in his chair, his confidence shaken, though he tried hard not to show it. His fingers tapped nervously on the table. A rhythm he couldn't control. Judge Reed watched him quietly, understanding that the moment for truth had arrived. The judge leaned back slightly and folded his hands. His calm voice echoed through the room. "Mr. Grange," he said, "before we continue, you were given an opportunity to speak." The prosecutor lowered his documents. The mother wiped her tears, and the entire courtroom waited. People hoped that maybe, for the first time, Tyler would show humility. Remorse, or even basic humanity. Tyler looked around, his eyes bouncing from the judge to the mother to the spectators. All he saw were angry faces, disappointed faces, faces filled with pain he did not want to deal with. His lawyer whispered urgently, "This is your chance. Apologize. Show respect. It will help you." But Tyler hated being told what to do. Especially in front of so many people, he pushed the suggestion away. Judge Reed's voice remained calm. "You may speak freely," he repeated, offering Tyler a rare moment of grace. It was not a trap. It was not pressure. It was an open door that could change everything for Tyler if he chose to step through it. But Tyler had never stepped through any door he didn't build himself. He didn't know how to respond to mercy because he had never needed it or appreciated it. He smirked, leaned back, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Honestly, Your Honor, I think this whole situation is exaggerated," he said. "People are acting like I ran over the kid." Shocked gasps filled the room. The mother's silent tears returned instantly. The jurors exchanged angry looks. The prosecutor clenched his jaw. Even Tyler's own lawyer closed his eyes, realizing the damage was now deeper than before. Tyler was not just arrogant, he was unaware of the pain his words caused. Judge Reed did not react with anger. He simply watched Tyler as if studying him, trying to understand the emptiness behind his arrogance. "Is that all you wish to say?" the judge asked softly. Tyler shrugged. "Yeah, I didn't do anything on purpose," he added. "People need to relax." Another wave of disbelief washed through the courtroom. The boy's mother let out a small cry, and her hands shook as she covered her face. A kind elderly man beside her placed a hand on her back, comforting her. Tyler glanced at her and rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on," he muttered. "She's being dramatic this time." Even the bailiff looked enraged. He took a small step forward. But Judge Reed lifted his hand gently, signaling him to stay calm. The judge's eyes no longer held only patience. They now held disappointment. Deep and heavy, the kind that carried more impact than anger ever could. "Mr. Grange," Judge Reed said, his voice firm but steady, "this courtroom gave you a moment to show understanding, compassion, or even a sense of responsibility." Tyler looked confused, as if the judge were speaking a foreign language, but instead, Judge Reed continued. "You have chosen pride over wisdom." Tyler tried to hide a flicker of discomfort by slouching deeper in his chair. His phone buzzed inside his pocket, but he ignored it. He didn't want to look at anything right now, especially not the judge's eyes, which seemed to see right through him. Judge Reed closed the file slowly, the sound of the pages folding louder than usual in the still air. "The court gave you a chance," he said softly, "and you rejected it without thought." His tone carried no anger. "Only truth. Your words today have shown the court not who you pretend to be, but who you really are," Tyler's lawyer whispered again. "Stop talking. Don't say another word." But Tyler snapped back. "I'm not scared." His voice sounded shaky even to himself. He felt something inside him that he didn't like, a tremble of unease, a hint of guilt, or maybe a fear he didn't want to admit. The judge lifted his chin, and the room waited for what would come next. "Since the defendant has chosen not to take responsibility," Judge Reed said, "the court will proceed accordingly." Tyler stared back defiantly, though deep down, he felt a strange coldness spreading through his chest. He didn't understand why it felt harder to breathe. Judge Reed then turned to the prosecutor. "Please continue with your remaining statements," he instructed. And just like that, the moment ended, the chance was gone. The door that had been opened for Tyler quietly closed, locked by his own pride. And everyone in the courtroom knew that Tyler Grange had just made the worst mistake of his life. The courtroom felt heavier than ever as Judge Reed prepared to speak. Everyone sensed something important was coming, something Tyler Grange could not laugh away, something money could not erase. Tyler sat with stiff shoulders, trying to maintain his arrogant expression, but a nervous twitch kept pulling at the corner of his mouth. His lawyer shifted uneasily, already fearing what the judge had decided. Judge Reed lifted the file and placed it gently on the bench. His calm voice carried across the room with sharp clarity. "This court must now deliver its ruling," he began. Every person in the room leaned forward, even the jurors who had been silent throughout the hearing. The air felt thick, as if every breath had weight. Tyler crossed his arms, pretending he wasn't scared, pretending the judge couldn't touch him, pretending he still had control, but deep down, a small flicker of fear had begun to grow. Spreading quietly through his chest, he remembered the video. The child on the bicycle, the mother crying. He tried to push those images away, but they clung to him like shadows he couldn't escape. Judge Reed continued, "Mr. Grange, the evidence shows that your actions placed a child's life at risk." Tyler opened his mouth to interrupt, but the judge raised a single finger, and Tyler fell silent. The courtroom had never seen someone silence a billionaire's son with such gentle authority. The judge continued, "What concerns this court even more is your complete lack of remorse." Tyler swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. He wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't form. He felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. His arrogance had been armor, but now that armor was cracking, and everyone could see it. Judge Reed leaned forward, his voice calm but powerful. "You have been given many chances in life," he said. "Chances that most people never receive." Tyler shifted in his seat. Uncomfortable with the truth, instead of growing wiser, the judge continued, "You have grown more careless, more entitled, and more dangerous." Several people nodded quietly, feeling the judge's words deeply. Tyler's father had bought him out of consequences for years. But in this courtroom, money had no power. Only truth mattered now. Only justice mattered now. Then came the part no one expected. Judge Reed paused, letting the silence settle, and then spoke with firm conviction. "This court will not sentence you to prison," he said. A few gasps filled the room. Tyler blinked, confused. For the first time, hope sparked in his eyes. He thought he had won again. He thought privilege had saved him one more time. But Judge Reed was not finished. His next words landed like thunder instead. This court sentences you to 1 full year of community service in the Maple Street neighborhood. The very place he endangered, the very families he disrespected. Tyler frowned, confused. Community service, he repeated, trying to hide the tremor in his voice that didn't sound serious to him. He thought it meant a few hours picking up trash. Something simple he could pretend to care about. But Judge Reed's sentence was far more than that. You will work for 12 months, the judge said. Serving the people whose lives you disregarded, the courtroom listened closely. You will clean public spaces, assist elderly residents, serve meals to struggling families, and repair damaged homes. Each description struck Tyler like a stone hitting glass. You will also tutor children at the community center 3 times a week, the judge added. Including the child you nearly harmed, Tyler's jaw dropped. He looked stunned, then offended. You can't be serious, he snapped. His voice cracked slightly. I'm not a babysitter, he said it loudly. Forgetting where he was, forgetting that this was not his world. Not his rules, the bailiff took a step forward. But Judge Reed simply lowered his gaze toward Tyler. His calm eyes held a different kind of power now. You will also attend weekly reflection sessions, he continued, and write a detailed report every month about what you learned. Tyler's face turned pale. He had never written anything more than a caption for his social media posts. And one more condition, Judge Reed said, raising his head. You will speak to local high school students about the dangers of recklessness, privilege, and arrogance. Tyler felt as if the floor dropped under him. Speak to students, serve meals, clean neighborhoods. Tutor kids. This was not punishment in Tyler's world. This was humiliation. But Judge Reed was not trying to humiliate him. He was trying to rebuild him. This sentence, he said calmly, is not designed to break you, Mr. Grange. The judge paused, his eyes softening just slightly. It is designed to wake you. The words echoed across the silent courtroom. Tyler felt heat rise to his face, anger mixing with confusion. But beneath all of it was something new, something he had never felt before: shame. A shallow breath left his lips as he looked down at the table, unable to meet the judge's eyes. Judge Reed closed the file, signaling the end. Court is adjourned, he said. His gavel came down with a deep, final thud. Tyler flinched at the sound, and the moment the echo faded, everyone in the room knew one thing for certain. The sentence had not broken Tyler Grange, but it had shaken the ground beneath him. Tyler Grange stood outside the courthouse after the sentencing, feeling the world spin around him. For the first time in his life, he had no clever joke, no arrogant smile, no easy escape. The weight of Judge Reed's words clung to him like a heavy shadow. Community service, working with the neighborhood he almost harmed, tutoring the same child he nearly hit, speaking to students about arrogance, it all felt unreal. Like a punishment meant for someone else, not for the billionaire's son who believed he lived above the world. But the sentence was real, and the next morning, Tyler began his year of service. The Maple Street Community Center stood quietly at the heart of the neighborhood. Its paint was fading, the playground fence was rusty, but the place pulsed with life. Children laughing, elders talking, volunteers moving with purpose. Tyler stepped inside wearing expensive shoes and a frown, sticking out like he didn't belong. Because he didn't, not yet, Miss Gloria. The center's supervisor greeted him with a warm smile, even though she knew exactly who he was. You're here to work, she said gently. Not to be served. Tyler rolled his eyes, but followed her anyway. She handed him gloves and pointed toward bags of trash that needed sorting. His jaw clenched. He had never cleaned anything in his life, not even his own room, but he had no choice. So he began, slowly, awkwardly, complaining under his breath. Hours passed, and for the first time he felt sweat on his forehead from work that wasn't part of a gym routine. His arms ached. His back hurt. But something else happened too. Every person who walked by thanked him, not sarcastically, not angrily. They thanked him the way people thank someone who actually helped them. Tyler didn't understand it. Gratitude was foreign to him. He only knew mockery and applause. Not genuine appreciation. Later that week, he began serving meals at the community kitchen. The line stretched out the door. Parents, children, elderly people with tired eyes, all waiting for a warm plate. Tyler scooped food silently, trying not to make eye contact, but one little girl smiled at him and said, "Thank you, mister." Her voice was soft. Sincere, it startled him, and for a moment, Tyler felt something he didn't recognize, warmth, not from the food, but from the kindness of someone who owed him nothing. Days turned into weeks, and the neighborhood began to change him little by little. He helped an elderly man fix a broken fence, and the man told him stories about the old days. He played basketball with teenagers who had never heard of his father's wealth. They didn't care about money, they cared about whether he played fair. He cleaned graffiti off walls, painted park benches, and picked up litter along sidewalks he once sped past without noticing. But the hardest part came when he finally met the child he almost hit. The boy, named Caleb, sat on a small chair at the tutoring room table. Legs swinging nervously, he looked up at Tyler with wide eyes. Not angry, just scared. Tyler's stomach twisted. He hadn't expected the boy to be so small, so innocent. "Hi," Caleb whispered. Tyler couldn't speak for a moment. His throat tightened. Seeing the boy's fragile courage, "I'm here to help you with homework," Tyler finally said. Sitting down slowly, their first session was awkward. Tyler didn't know how to teach. He barely knew how to sit still. But Caleb tried harder than anyone Tyler had ever met, and after a while, Tyler realized something important. He wanted the boy to succeed, not because of the judge's sentence, but because Caleb deserved it. As the days went on, they laughed during math problems, shared snacks, and talked about dreams. Caleb wanted to become an engineer, and Tyler found himself encouraging him in ways he never thought possible. The biggest change came when Tyler had to speak at the high school assembly. Hundreds of teenagers filled the room. Staring at him with curious eyes, Tyler stepped onto the stage. His hands shaking slightly, he took a breath. Remembering Judge Reed's calm voice, remembering Caleb's smile, remembering the mother's tears. For the first time in his life, he spoke honestly. "I thought the world belonged to me," he said. "But I was wrong." He talked about arrogance, entitlement, and nearly ruining a child's life. He spoke about the neighborhood that showed him more kindness than he deserved. The students listened closely, some nodding, some tearing up when he finished. The applause felt different from the applause he was used to. This applause wasn't for show. It was for truth. It was for change. A year later, Tyler returned to Judge Reed's courtroom. This time, when the bailiff shouted, "All rise," Tyler stood instantly, head lowered with respect. Judge Reed looked at him and saw a different man, tired, humbled, but awakened. "Have you learned?" the judge asked softly. Tyler's voice trembled. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "More than I ever imagined." The courtroom, stunned, watched the boy who once refused to stand, now bow his head with gratitude. And in that moment, Tyler Grange finally rose. Not with arrogance, but with the dignity Judge Reed had hoped to teach him.